Hi, I'm Owen Canfield with the opinion page of the Oklahoman, joined here on Friday, as I am every week, by Mike McNutt, our chief Capitol correspondent, to talk about life at the Capitol. Mike, good to have you here as always.
Thanks, Owen. Good to be here.
Good Friday. Happy Good Friday to you. The budget has been the overwhelming issue since long before the session even began. It continues to be so. And you're seeing some trickle-down effects of the tight budget. A couple stories this week. One dealt with cuts being made in the Senate and the House to sort of handle this crisis, and also a lawsuit reform bill that was passed last session. Part of that was that we had to build an indemnity fund to help with payouts in doctor cases. That money's not available, and so it's affected the future of that bill. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, the lawsuit, part of the lawsuit reform, House Bill 1603 was passed last year. Part of it was to set up this indemnity fund to have money available for what's called non-economic damages of pain and suffering, if you will. Anything over $400,000, any judgment against a physician, a medical malpractice, this money then that judgment would go to this fund.
Right.
And it's going to be capped at $20 million. Now, the state could have $20 million to put in a fund. They don't, and they never really intended to put all that money out there. What they can do is put some cash in there or buy what's called a reinsurance policy, which basically takes out an insurance policy, and then if they have a large judgment against a practitioner or a hospital, then they would pay it, and reinsurer would provide that money. They estimate that it could cost $3 to $5 million. As you mentioned, we're 1.2. The legislators have $1.2 billion less this year than last year to spend. So every $1 million has to be justified.
Counts,
so they're not going. They don't have the money this fiscal year to buy a policy. But what they are going to do is go ahead, pass the legislation to set up a board of trustees to seek bids, see how much it will cost. They have until May of 2011 to have the indemnity fund formulated. So this would give them some real numbers to use and get a board in place, so that by next May, they're hoping that the economic picture might increase, that they could then buy this policy and have it going in effect.
Right. Now, in the Senate and the House, we talked briefly. The Speaker and the Senate Pro Tem are pinching pennies, if you will, to make ends meet and get by. Is there a potential for Senate staffers to be furloughed or to be laid off?
Yeah, the Senate staffers will be furloughed beginning in the beginning of the fiscal year. I think 2 days a month is what they've worked out, and it could be increased if the budget picture does not improve in the coming fiscal year. They're not hiring, not filling vacancies. They're trying not to lay off people. They're just trying to work this through. They have, and they also if you go to the Capitol and visit your legislator, they will have free coffee and water available for you, iced tea, no more.
Buy your own.
Yeah, I think it's less than $100,000. I think it's $20,000. Not a huge amount of money.
Every 20 grand counts, though, right?
Right, and I guess perception is what it is. But so they're looking at different ways to cut. The House, the Senate, had a little carryover fund over the years, and when they had that power sharing agreement a couple years ago, when both were split in the Senate, remember that meant the Republicans have a chief of staff, the secretary, all those positions then were hired and paid at the same salary as the president pro tem, the Democrats. So that ate up their carryover. The House has had up to $8 million carryover, and again, it's been going on for years. It's down to about $4 million now. They use some of that money to renovate in the Capitol offices. They put in some electronic computer devices so you can watch committee votes live on the internet. And they're using that money also. They've been having 7% budget cuts. They've been using that to absorb the cuts. So they're a little bit better shape, but they also are looking at some furloughs starting at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Right.
They've already shut down, like on Fridays, the printing room will be shut down. They won't do the reduced mailings, and they already reduced travel. If a legislator's been on a trip, then he has to pay. If he wants to go back, he or she wants to go back on that trip, then he or she has to contribute some money to go on of their own personal funds to go to the trip. So it's not. It's the House has 200 and some odd employees. If you talk about the executive assistants, there's 100 legislators. Each one has an assistant, plus the attorneys, fiscal analysts. So when you add it up, it's a pretty good chunk of people who are behind the scenes getting legislation prepared for the legislators. So those cuts were announced, and again, they've got a carryover money that, again, I don't think anybody's in danger of being laid off,
Yeah.
but they aren't hiring new positions when their vacancies arise.
Right. A couple other interesting bills. One I wanted to touch on real quick. Homebrew. I know you're a homebrew maker yourself. No, but a bill would allow folks who like to make their own beer to do so. They'd have to register with the state and couldn't make more than, 200 gallons a year, I
Right.
think.
About 80 cases.
Yeah, that gets me through most weekends.
I would think.
But anyway, I think that's an interesting bill, something that I'm not sure how needed it was, but it gets folks who are concerned about the issue, it helps to alleviate that, puts them on record as being a homebrew maker.
Well, winemakers and people who make wine and ale
Right.
right now can do that.
Right.
And it's the same process. They have to just register with ABLE.
Sure.
And this all came out of a story that someone did a feature on a home brewer, and they looked at it and said, hey, it's against the law. And it goes back to the Prohibition days. The state really didn't want anybody messing with it. And most home brewers do it for a hobby. There's all kinds of shows that they go to.
My college roommate used to make his own beer.
Right.
I never touched it, but I've told him it was very good.
Better tasting beer probably than your college roommate. But there are contests and such. And so some people came to a legislator and said, sure, we'd like to try to do this. And the legislator said, well, if doing it for wine, why not beer? And
so it makes sense, and it
looks like it's going to pass. And I imagine the governor, who knows if he'll sign it, but probably, unless there's some stiff opposition, which so far hasn't arisen.
Sure. We've got to run. Mike, thanks for your time. We appreciate you joining us this week on News OK, and invite you to read Mike's stories every day in the Oklahoman.